Okay, but one thing that I did with this set that's a little bit different is if you look here on deck A, okay, I have these three loops. I renamed them loop 1, loop plus 12, and loop rev. And these three loops are actually, I customized these because they're actually just shorter durations of the original song called Cream, but I'm using something called follow actions to, if you ever want to do some kind of hybrid remixing on the fly, or if you wanted to maybe chop up and modulate the original file and play around with it, do some glitchy kind of stuff. Follow actions is a great way to do that, and I'll demonstrate in a moment how this works. But one of the most important things, once you get your tracks loaded in and you rename them, staying organized is key here, by tempo and key. The next thing you're going to want to do is make sure that your tracks have been warped correctly. What do I mean by that? That Ableton is actually reading the tracks correctly by tempo. So if this were an Ableton class, like if you actually were in a live session with us, whether that's through our Zoom classes that we do or in-person classes, we do a whole series on all the different warp modes and how to warp tracks correctly. This right now, I'm not going to really dive too heavy into warping, but it's important to note that you should definitely have warping activated. If your tracks are not activated with warp, you're going to get into trouble, especially when you're trying to match tempos together. So that's really important. And under this, you'll see that you have different warp modes. There's beats, tones, textures, repitch, complex, and complex pro. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. There's some really creative things that you can do in beats mode, same with repitch and texture and tones mode. But when it comes to full complex audio waveforms, meaning actual full songs that have either vocals or chords, harmonies, drums, rhythm, bass, etc., it's recommended that you set all of your tracks to complex pro mode. Okay, so complex pro mode, with the expense of running your CPU a little bit hotter, it's not that big of a deal. But if you want to preserve the actual quality as much as you can, because as soon as you activate warp, what the warp engine does, it adds a little bit of compression, especially when you start adding warp markers. But if you leave it in complex pro, it will sound as close to the original as possible when you're doing a live DJ set. In this case, I wanted to make sure these tracks kept their key, and if I did decide to change the tempo, the key would not shift. It would stay in its original form. Okay, so yeah, make sure all of your tracks are warped correctly, and you have them in what's called complex pro mode. And for what it's worth too, just one kind of pointer I can suggest and give you is when you are warping your tracks, make sure you find the downbeat. Okay, and then your clue into knowing if you've actually matched the correct tempo or not is also looking at your segment BPM. A lot of times when people are starting out using Ableton Live, they assume that the master tempo up here is what's in line with what's happening with the original segment BPM. That's what this is here. So your segment BPM is not necessarily meant to match what's happening in the master tempo. The master tempo is only for outputting playback. So the cool thing is, once you get your tracks warped in real time, you can do things like this, where if I come over to the scene section, I can play both of these tracks at once. Okay. And I can adjust the tempo accordingly, and they will stay synced together. And how do I know these tracks have been warped correctly, other than setting this up myself and knowing from just doing this from practice? The more you practice this, the better and the more efficient you will get at warping. But also using the metronome to see if the metronome click matches with the actual beat of the down beats that you're hearing in this 4/4 time signature.
Like this.
Okay.
Like this.
Okay, so
like this.
even though I'm playing both of these at once and I'm playing them at both different tempos, this one's originally 122, this one's 122, but the master is outputting at 120. But if you look at my segment BPM, it says 122. Okay, so that's important that you do that, warping and warp modes, getting your tracks synced to Ableton, and then running them in Complex Pro.